Welcome to everyone, and it's great to be back to discuss this topic. As you know, Blake and I have been working on the Board Diversity Initiative along with a team from Support Kansas City for nearly 4 years, and it's exciting to get to dive into where we are now, the status of the initiative, and how you can get engaged. This is work that's very dear to our heart and what we believe to be very impactful for our sector. So with that, I wanted to talk about how did we start? For those of you who've heard us talk about Board Diversity Initiative, which is also referred to as BDI, we have looked at the not-for-profit sector for some time and the areas in which we can grow intentionally. And prior to starting my business, Connection Coach KC, I was in the not-for-profit sector for 20 years. And from the moment I entered the field up until today, each organization that I've worked with has always spoken about wanting to increase diversity on boards. It's an area that not-for-profits have noted as a place that needs to have improvement. And although there have been efforts that have been made, what we've seen with the stats, not only nationally but locally, is that we've hardly moved the needle. The numbers and the breadth of diversity that we saw in the 90s is very similar to what you would see today. So with that, we decided what would be a comprehensive approach be able to affect change in this area. And so the why behind this initiative was really crucial and really the backbone of what we were thinking about when we were developing the BDI. And there were some key things that just really resonated with us. And essentially, diversity matters. What we know and the research shows is that boards that are more diverse not only are able to have great gains in innovation and thought leadership, but they reach their goals at a more effective rate than boards that are not. And we really believe in this sentiment, not for us, without us. I think many of you have heard the expression that a board should represent the community served. And we really believe that when we are putting policies, procedures, and practices into place to create those without the very individuals that will benefit from those resources is an injustice. So to have those who will be recipients of services deciding and determining the factors that directly impact the programming is crucial and vital in being at the decision-making table. Also, what we've noticed is, so the data shows that 60% of the services that nonprofits provide are in communities that are marginalized or in diverse communities. However, the boards do not represent or reflect the community served. Now, a lot of times people say 60% of the individuals receiving services are from diverse identities. We know that many of the not-for-profit organizations that we work with, the missions that they have were directly created as a result of systemic oppression. So the organizations themselves are often stepping in the gaps that we've seen in terms of systemic or institutionalized oppression. In addition, organizations are here to administer to people of color as well as all areas of diversity. And however, those from communities of color make up less than 20%, 25% of board seats. So while we're seeing that the recipients may be people of color, that those board seats don't represent that at all. And so when we started the BDI, we wanted to start not only with the research that I just mentioned, that was the catalyst from this, this article, Leading with Intent, that we found from Board Source. We also wanted to get the gurus in our community, those who are doing this work really strategically, and engaging them to help us with the thought leadership and the foundation of the program. And we started with the BDI champions, and you can see the names of those individuals listed here today. They helped with the foundational pieces in determining what the BDI would look like, the format, the structure, as well as what the content could entail. And then after we had the BDI champions, we whittled down to a smaller tech team that dug in deeper to create the nuts and bolts and put meat on the bone, so to speak, and develop the framework. And those individuals, Cass Butler Dunlap, who really assisted us with the materials you're seeing today, the slides, the online platform, the marketing materials, and the branding. David Oliver, Dave Smith, Gabby Flores also helped flesh out the different components that Blake will speak about further, but lended their leadership, their professional acumen, their expertise, their community connections to really leverage this work. And this work could not have happened without the initial investment from some key funders. Kansas Health Foundation was our largest and first funder that really invested in this work to allow us to build out the program and also do a pilot. Hall Family Foundation, as well as the Kauffman Foundation. So these three funders have showed their initial support, and we hope to gain ongoing support from additional funders. So then after that, it's been a journey. As we mentioned, Blake and I started this work in 2020. And as you know, with the pandemic, there's been stops and starts. And in addition, we pivoted, one of my favorite words, we pivoted as we found more information and wanted to make this truly a program that would be sustainable and would be accessible to the not-for-profits in our community. So in 2019, you'll see this. We started with the vision, as we mentioned, we floated the concept, and really that started with Deborah Box, our initial founder for Support Kansas City, and then engaged funders. And we invited those thought leaders, as we mentioned, and then went into the champions in 2020. And then COVID, George Floyd, all the things we know happened. And we took pause, and those individuals that we were most leaning into to do this work were pulled in different areas in the community to handle the rise in DEI requests and the urgency that was needed in 2020. So we did not have continuous as engagement on this work, but re-engaged in 2021 and had some really great movement there where we did the initial framework. The curriculum ideas were generated. We wanted it to be different. We didn't want more of the same. And we wanted to make sure it really spoke to the adult learner, that we had time for not only discussion, interactive activities, and meaningful dialogue and online engagement. We also wanted to make sure that there was opportunities to put the things that were taught into practice. So not only just looking at policies and looking at internally, but also putting that into practice. So that was done. And then the branding was envisioned when we brought in Cass Butler Dunlap. The curriculum continued to be drafted in 2022 with logistics created, a learning model engaged, and what we realized that we needed to pilot it. And once we did, as often is the case, some of the things that we thought would be most successful, we tweaked. We built out the learning platform, we tested the framework and curriculum, and what we mostly focused on was revamping the structure so that it would be palatable to boards that have very busy schedules. And then just recently in April, we were thrilled to have our big kickoff launch. Thank you to so many of you that were there. Far exceeded our expectations in terms of interest. We've had an influx of people that want to get involved. And then we developed the Train the Trainer, and we hope to have a goal of 10 organizations going through the process and 120 candidates ready to serve on boards this year. And part of our partnership that we also included that has been one of the key aspects and most pivotal components is looking at not only the national research, which was the foundation for this, but what does Kansas City look like? We like to talk so often about how Kansas City is this philanthropic community, a community where people are really engaged in not-for-profit work and that we have a thriving sector. And we wanted to see if the data matched. And so we partnered with UMKC's Midwest Center for Nonprofit Leadership that many of you are very familiar with Julie Klima, Dr. Brent Never, and some researchers to look at what the landscape looks like in Kansas City. And there's some additional slides that we'll be sending out post presentations so that you can look deeper into that research, but it's very interesting. And what we saw is it really mirrors a lot of the national data as well. One piece of information that I thought was so crucial is that 59% of the organizations that took part in the survey and the data that was collected say that demographic characteristics of board members is very important. And we see that all the time. When I'm talking to people in the community about the work I do, I have yet to meet someone who has said that board diversity was not important. But 39% saying they have formally identified the desired mix of diversity, skills, and connections they expect to be represented by their board. So only 39% say they feel like they're where they want to be, which shows that there's lots of growth. So if you look at that the other way, 61% say that there's growth to be done in that area. And then this is where I think we're ahead of the national data. 76% report having a diversity statement finalized or in process. And as many of you know, the diversity statement is that compass for guiding the work of diversity throughout the organization. So that's really some promising work, but still work to be done. So what is the BDI? I'm going to go ahead and share with you just this real briefly and then pass it over to Blake. The BDI has these three components. And really, we wanted to do something comprehensive instead of just the board matching, is what we'd seen in the past, identifying candidates that were board ready, identifying boards that needed board members, and doing a match. What we have noticed is that while that is step one, that's a preliminary level, that it goes so much deeper than that. What the Board Diversity Initiative was built to do is to help shape board culture by creating shared power and inclusive leadership. What we have found is the decision-making table has to change to be able to engage those from diverse identities, to not only recruit them, but to retain them. And that's what's different, we feel, about the BDI than other processes that have been done. It's looking at the very culture and changing that systemically so that board culture can recruit, will be more of a magnet for those from diverse identities, and a space where people not only feel welcomed, but valued and also supported. So on these three things, we want to shape board culture, as we mentioned. We also want to provide support for the executive leader. Many of you who are watching today are either the executive director, or you may be a part of the leadership team. And we know change is hard, and working with your boards, there's this really unique relationship. And we want the executive leaders to have a space where they can speak to each other as well. And then also building a pipeline of board ready candidates. That question, who do you know, has been the avatar for finding board members. And we want to change that question so that we have individuals in our pipeline, in our network already, that are just there and ready to be recruited to board. So we'll switch from that.
So we have a 3-track approach for BDI. And one of the tracks, the first track we would say, is really the organizations track, and that's working with organizations to shift board culture, like Nicole mentioned, really changing the culture of the organization to attract and retain diverse candidates. And so we're engaging the organization's full board and the executive leader to cultivate a culture of inclusivity. We're going through some basic DEI training with the organization, having shared language, understanding of terms, and really looking at the operational pieces of the organization through an equity lens, and identifying what is an equity lens, and how can we shape the processes and procedures around the board and the organization through that equity lens. So operationalizing DEI principles and embracing a shared power and adopt an inclusive leadership model. That's what we're doing with organizations, and we work with these organizations over the term of a year. It starts with an initial meeting that would be a half-day retreat, followed by 2-hour training sessions that happen quarterly. And so we found that while DEI is important and this board diversity initiative is very important, it is not the sole thing that boards are focused on, and not the sole thing that they're working on. And so we want to allow time for them to continue on their mission while still thinking about BDI and how they're changing their culture through this process. So that's our board track. And with the board track, like Nicole mentioned, we found that executive leaders, they're really the connecting point between the board and the BDI team, and they have a unique relationship with the board. And so through that, we wanted to provide support to them as they are navigating these at times difficult conversations with the board, and really changing their organization's culture. And so what that looks like is the executive leader gets to engage in a roundtable of other executive leaders whose boards are going through BDI at the same time. So they have other people at the table that they can, discuss different ideas with, or talk through different situations. And it's also led by a BDI team member who has served in that space as an executive leader, and also has the DEI background. And so they're, there to answer questions and provide support to the executive leaders as their board goes through the training. And that looks like, again, a roundtable discussion. And so just peer support through the process, empowering leaders to affect change, and ensuring that they have the necessary resources to navigate these conversations with their board. And then in addition to the organization track and the executive leader track, we also have the candidate track, which is very important as we hope to identify candidates who want to serve on boards, who have all of the skills and tools necessary. They may not have been asked or been in the spaces to be asked to serve on boards, or they might not feel like they have the skills necessary to serve on a board. So we're working with these candidates to understand, what their transferable skills are and what does board service look like, and empowering them to feel that they are board ready to serve in these spaces and their voice is important at the table. Really working to identify and remove that imposter syndrome from these individuals. Who we know would be amazing board members and have, very important opinions to share, but again, maybe they've just never been asked. And so, the candidate track is really to equip them with the knowledge to navigate the board table. Maybe you're coming from a background that's not nonprofit and you are not used to all of the terms. So we're talking about, what is board service look like? What is the time commitment? What's the terminology that you're going to hear as a board member, things that you should know, and also understanding what right fit looks like to you. So just because, you've been asked doesn't mean that you should accept that position. What are you looking for out of board service as well? And then creating a pathway for active participation, leadership on board. So you're not just there, but you're actively participating and, you feel valued at the board table. And so what that looks like is a half-day retreat followed by a full-day retreat where we're working with candidates, and then ongoing support through the process, as well as a matching aspect to it in addition to that. There's ongoing training, there's cohorts of people. Like Nicole mentioned, we're hoping to train 120 candidates this year and help get them matched on nonprofit boards moving forward. So that's our candidate track. So it's really a 3-track approach. That's BDI. And then where does SKC come in? So as Nicole mentioned, when she was going through the journey in 2019, this was an idea that Deborah Box, SKC's previous executive director, came up with as she was reading through the Board Source article. And, really thinking about the organizations that SKC works with and, does their board reflect the communities that they're serving? And we know now through research, both nationally and locally, that most nonprofit boards don't reflect the communities that they serve, or, they don't have diverse representation on their nonprofit boards. And so through that, we brought together the champions and then the TA team, and now Support Kansas City, myself included. We serve as the administrative support for BDI. So we are, again, behind the scenes helping to facilitate and also helping with the match, helping with the software and the platforms and all of the things that involve BDI. So as somebody who's interested, and we'll talk about how to get involved with BDI, as somebody who's interested in getting involved with BDI, you'll probably likely hear from me moving forward, or Nicole as part of the team, but Support Kansas City serves behind the scenes for BDI. And then supporting resources, we've been very intentional about building BDI out so that those who are going through the program, through the initiative, feel supported and have a one-stop shop for all of the information that they're getting through the BDI, which is a lot of information that we're sending your way as you're going through the training. And so in order to do that, we've created an online software through Zenler. It's a learning platform where all of the information is stored. All of the modules are stored there. We have a participant workbook that you'll go through as a participant, both as a board and also as a candidate, which is all can be accessed through Zenler. And we'll have resources there, and you have access as somebody who's gone through BDI, you will continue to have access to the resources that were provided to you during your time going through BDI. And so this is just an example of some of the online resources that we provide through Zenler. I do want to mention that we also acknowledge that, you know, maybe an online resource might not be the best option for your organization or you as a candidate, and we are flexible in how we present this information. So we also have the ability to present this information in, you know, written format if your organization wants printed workbooks. If you're somebody who wants or needs printed workbooks, we can meet you and your organization where you're at and what you're needing, but we do have the online platform available as well. And in addition to that, in addition to the participant workbook and the online training, we also have a going beyond option for anybody who is very invested in this work and might want additional information. That is part of the participant workbook. You can dive in a little deeper to beyond what we're presenting in the training as well. And then I would like to just mention that we are working with a lot of nonprofit organizations or candidates who are working in the nonprofit space, but we are also partnering with corporate partners as well, working with ERG groups. And we found this is a great resource to get community members engaged in the nonprofit community. And we found that, you know, as an employee, if you're engaged in the community, you're likely to stay in the community, you're likely to give back to the community. And, you know, we do this through our corporate partners. So we're excited and very open to partnering with corporations through BDI as well. And that looks slightly different. Again, we're flexible in how we present the information to meet your organization where you're at. And make sure that you have all the resources that you're needing. So that brings us to ways to engage. And there are several ways to engage with BDI. You can engage as a potential candidate. You can engage as a potential organization. You can also engage as a potential facilitator. If you're somebody who works in the DEI space, who has, you know, background knowledge and you're interested in giving back or participating in that way as a facilitator, you can engage with BDI in that way as well. And regardless of how you'd like to engage, it's all the same. We have this QR code will take you to the website. There's a spot on the website, which I will link in the chat as well here in just a minute, where you can fill out an inquiry form for the different areas that you're interested in, as well as a general inquiry form. If you're not sure and you'd like to talk to one of the BDI team members, you can fill that form out as well, and we'll follow up with you on that area as well. But you can fill out a form if you'd like to be a candidate. You can fill out a form if you're interested in going through the organization training, and you can also fill out a form if you're interested in being a facilitator. As Nicole mentioned, we've seen a huge influx of people who are interested, and so we're working our way through the inquiry forms, and we're hoping to have more information to everyone and start scheduling trainings and you know, modules starting in early July.